Hello everyone, WallaceMan105 here, and we're back with episode 4 of Railtech. Today we're going over intersections. This won't be a set of block-by-block tutorials on different builds, but simply an overview of the options that you can use. As I do tutorials on these different builds going forward, I'll try and make sure to add links to them into this video's description. So, let's start with the basics and level up from there. The core mechanic of any rail intersection of any kind is right here, the track switch. By powering and unpowering corner rails, you can change which connection they form. Let's quickly go over what you can and what you can't do with this powerful tool. The key limit to remember here is going to be the southeast rule. That's going to be the default for all corner rails. They're going to want to connect these two directions before they connect north or west. The second thing to remember is that minecarts will enter corner rails from the back end, this wide end here. Making sure to keep these two phenomenon in mind will help make sure that you always send your carts in the direction you want them to go into. Let's look at some of the layouts that help you with that. First, we have the classic T-switch. This is as simple as it gets. You change whether or not it's powered, and you change which of these two tracks you go into. Then over here, we have the H-switch, which is simply a T-switch that's extended on one side so that two of these tracks run parallel. Next up is the Y-switch, which is primarily useful for merging or splitting into two different tracks from one. And then we also here have the Pi-switch, which is two T-switches on the same side of the track. This is useful for when you want to consolidate multiple inbound lanes, like say if you had one big intersection up ahead and you wanted everybody to use the same thing coming in regardless of where they're going. Finally, we have this switch, which I haven't really come up with a clever name for, but it's made of two T-switches on opposite sides. This helps overcome a rather irritating limit of all corner rails, the 4-point limit. Corner rails surrounded on all four sides by other rails won't switch directions when they're powered or unpowered. Also, corner rails can't change their connection to connect to another corner rail, even if you also power the other rail. So they have to be spaced out like so. Placing detector rails in line with your switches can help to automate them. This is most useful for filtering out carts going the wrong way. However, outside power sources such as tripwires, redstone torches, levers, they have a lot more power when it comes to track selection. While all of these tools and layouts have their own use cases, they do have an inherent limit. You can only choose two directions at once. A proper intersection of two rail lines would require three choices: left, right, and straight ahead. Now, stacking multiple switches, like we saw in the double T switch with the offset from earlier, will get you to that point. But trying to make a double track version of this gets ugly. Instead, the preferred option of most Minecraft rail enthusiasts is to build rail roundabouts. A rail roundabout builds a small loop of rails to send the cart through with 4 different options for entering or exiting. A signal through some manner of redstone is sent to a given corner rail, allowing for the player to choose their exit. For example, if I hit left on here, you'll see 3 of them change, and the cart will go to this track on the left. While the 4-way is most common, these can be built to support a rather large number of rail lines, and they can even be built for single track systems. You can generally divide rail roundabouts into one of 2 categories based on how the redstone signal gets sent: absolute input, like this one here, or variable input, like this one here. An absolute input system is going to simply run the power directly from the source, like this button, through its power lines into the blocks it needs to power. Variable input systems, like this one here, will use a comparator loop below the rail loop, which will open different exits based on the signal strength pushed into the loop from the given side. Of the two, absolute input systems are far, far simpler to build and far, far cheaper in terms of materials. In fact, you can even build them without any redstone loop underneath and have them be completely manually controlled like these two here. However, for intersections of more than 2 lines, variable input systems are going to be a lot more powerful in terms of track selection, like this massive 8-way intersection here. However, and I cannot stress this enough, don't overthink your system. 9 times out of 10, a simple 4-way roundabout will be plenty for your system. Lastly, we'll go full circle and cover T-Junctions. These are basically a double-track version of T-switches, and they're very useful for branches off a main line or station access to and from a line. However, and this is simply my opinion, I don't prefer to build these. I instead, in those situations, would usually opt to build a roundabout and simply leave out one of the sides. Doing this allows for much easier expansion in the future, and if you're working with other less rail-inclined players, it's better if you only need to teach them how to build the one design. However, T-junctions do have one key advantage over roundabouts, and that's generally going to be their smaller footprint. If you want to build a junction into your tracks, but you're working in tight spaces, T-junctions can be, much like their Tetris counterpart, a perfect fit. That's going to wrap up today's video on minecart intersections. Today was a quick one. I had a lot going on this week, especially with the snapshot for rail experiments coming out. But tutorials for all the builds seen here today are coming. However, there are 2 more videos about minecart basics I want to make, stops and elevators. And lastly, before I go today, I just want to thank everybody for the great support this series has gotten so far. As I record this, episode 2 is about to crack 500 views, I've hit 100 subs, and I've gotten a good number of comments about this series being helpful. I really appreciate it, because this has just been a lot of fun to work on. But that's about it. So, until next time, guys, I'm Wallace. I hope you learned something, and remember to take it easy.